Let's get to our senior economics reporter, Steve Leeson. That never happened to me, Steve. Never happened in college, never happened in... No one ever came up and gave me a card.
Yes, Joe. Well, the president, as you just said, announcing moments ago that former Fed Governor Kevin Warsh will be his pick for nominee. That concludes a very months-long process. I began back in the summertime. There's a picture of Kevin Warsh. He was, as you said, at the Duquesne family office partner going back to 2011, working with famed investor Stanley Druckenmiller, governor from 2006 to 2011, and a special assistant to George Bush in 2002 and 8. He's been a sharp critic, as you know, Joe, of the Fed and Powell, blames them for the pandemic inflation. There you go. And he says the balance sheet can be, quote, reduced significantly. That's one of the concerns out there in the market. But he has said do that over time, and it would allow for rates to be reduced further. He has praised the pro-growth policies of championed by President Trump and said the Fed should abandon the dogma that growth creates inflation. I'm not sure the Fed has that dogma, but he says the Fed should abandon it. He supported the initial QE purchases of the Fed in the great financial crisis. Then he broke with Bernanke over subsequent QE purchases, in part because of his concern over inflation. That inflation didn't appear, and he's been criticized for that. His concern over inflation, one of the reasons why people think he's somewhat hawkish. He further argued that QE encouraged Congress to spend, leading to massive deficits out there. He thinks the Fed responsible for that. Now, on Fed independence, Warsh told us in July, quote, "I've strongly believed for 20 years, and history tells us, that independent conduct of monetary policy is essential." But Warsh has said repeatedly the Fed will secure that independence by reducing its footprint in the economy, balance sheet, and its political profile. That's what makes some on Wall Street a little bit wary that Warsh will be less likely to come to the market's rescue in a crisis, or if it does, that he will withdraw the support far more quickly than it has in the past. It's kind of old school thinking. We're going to talk to Raphael Bosca, the Fed president, about this and other issues. But, Joe, it's kind of like an old school idea of central bank going back to Bagehot in the 19th century, that the Fed should be the provider of liquidity, a banker of last resort, but not go further than that.
Yeah, over the years, we've seen so many op-eds from Kevin Warsh in the Journal arguing different points. And I think, maybe sometimes great minds think alike. I know he and Stan Druckenmiller obviously discuss a lot of these issues, and he used the word words regime change in a way that it was hard to really understand exactly what he means. But if you talk about regime change at the Fed, there's a lot of things that you have a problem with, other than just who the current Fed chair is. It's sort of a systemic issue that I think he has about transparency as well. Every waking thought coming from the Fed and dot plots and all those things. I think he'd like to change that a little bit too, Steve, right?
I think that's right. Some of the things that Warsh has said make a lot of sense, and some people puzzle over some of these things, I have to say. When I talk to other people who are, I guess, maybe part of the current regime, they're a little puzzled by some of the comments that Warsh makes. And there's some questions about exactly what he'll do. I mean, what he has is this notion, and this is out there as a conservative critique, I guess, right now. Maybe it's more from the Trump side than it is the conservative side, that if growth is high, that the Fed raises rates. That's not actually accurate. The Fed raises rates, looks at growth as relative to potential and says there's a risk there of inflation. But it's really hard to find a situation where the Fed has really cut off growth too dramatically by raising rates in the face of strong growth that wasn't accompanied by inflation.
We think about that every single time it's the good news, bad news. We always talk about it. Something comes out. It's either a good jobs number or a hot GDP number, or it doesn't have to be inflation. And we'll say, Joe, the market's down because now they think that future rate cuts are in jeopardy because the economy's running hot. That's the whole nature of what we think.
But the weird thing, Joe.
But we think about that all the time, and maybe it's not true.
Absolutely right.
And we don't.
Absolutely right.
Why should we always think, uh-oh, we need to slow the economy down? If there's productivity and there's no inflation, it's like, let it ride, baby. And actually, Besson has said they want someone like that. The president is innovative. Someone like Greenspan back in the 90s.
What about a market melt-up? That's the
Wait,
concern.
Joe. What is the actual?
That's the same thing.
What were the actual instances of that? And hasn't the conservative critique of the Fed been that the Fed is too easy? That has been the running critique of the Federal Reserve for decades. And when I think back on the situations that you're talking about, you're right. The market does get concerned about that. But the real actions of the Fed, as at least critique from the right, have been that the Fed is too easy. Think about, it raised rates in 99. Was that wrong? That was, and he let them ride in 96. Go back through the decades, Joe, and it's hard to find a case where the Fed said, well, because of high growth, we're raising rates. It does so when inflation ticks up.
Right. Steve, let me ask you this. Because Kevin Warsh has been so critical of the Fed for so long, I know there are some people inside the Federal Reserve right now who are not huge fans. What's the relationship going to be like with him coming in? And I ask that specifically because the chairman of the Fed is not necessarily handed a mandate to be able to determine how the FOMC will vote on any given day. Will he be able to come in and build a consensus to say, here's what I think, and that's why I'm going to convince the rest of you that this is what we're doing?
Becky, what you're just pointed to is essentially the Federal Reserve Chair's job, right? Congress creates this Federal Reserve that has representatives from districts all through the country. And I'll get to the staff in a second. That's a separate order because Warsh has criticized staff. He's criticized the PhD. He's criticized the elite running policy. And he also has said that policy has been favoring the wealthy rather than people. And I think rightly so when it comes to criticizing, by the way, the Fed's actions during the pandemic. But he's going to have to put a consensus together. And by the way, that's one of the things that, at least in our Fed survey, is something that makes people a little less concerned about whoever this chair is going to be, is that the committee is still there. He still needs the committee. He has to work with them. Now, the Fed chair has a lot of sway over the committee, especially the Board of Governors typically. But there's going to be people like, you think about the tradition at Kansas City, which has been, leaning against lower rates for a very long time, back through many presidents. We have Esther George on all the time, Tom Honig, and now Alberto Musalem, who's in there, has been somewhat hawkish. That's St. Louis. Jeff Schmidt from Kansas City has dissented several times. So Fed Chair Becky's going to have to put the together. He's going to have to work with the staff. But you can imagine, you're right. There are people who disagree with Powell, with Warsh's ideas, especially about QE, and they think that Warsh was wrong, essentially, in the wake of the great financial crisis about his concern about inflation when it came to QE.